Hi, everybody. Welcome to this eSchool News webinar on a blueprint for effective instructional coaching programs, creating success from planning through ongoing support. This event is brought to you by Better Lesson, which enables schools and districts to realize the promise of their initiatives with adaptable professional learning solutions that help build capacity at every level within your organization. Here's an overview of what we'll be covering today. After introductions and a quick explanation of how to use this platform, our presenters will discuss what makes instructional coaching effective, the key factors that influence success, and how one district in particular has built a strong culture of coaching in rural Montana. Then we'll wrap things up with a quick Q&A period. My name is Dennis Pierce, and I'll be moderating the event. I'm the former editor of eSchool News. I'm now a freelance education writer and consultant, and I'm very excited to have you join us for what should be a very informative session. Before I introduce our presenters, I just want to take a minute to go over some of the features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. Today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. You can submit your questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the purple Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, typing your question into the pop-up box and hitting submit. We'll save those questions for the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We also have a group chat function that you can launch by clicking on the blue chat button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to use this feature to chat among yourselves or to contact somebody from the eSchool News team if you have a technical question. But please don't use this feature to ask the panelists questions. If you have a question for the speakers, you should use the Q&A box that I just talked about. If you find that you're having a hard time reading the text on the slides, you can enlarge that portion of your screen by clicking on the box in the upper right-hand corner of the slide window. Or you can click on the double arrows for a full screen view of the slide presentation. We encourage you to join the back channel conversation on Twitter by using the Twitter handle @BetterLesson and the hashtag ESNWebinar in your tweets. And finally, Better Lesson has made a free white paper available for you to download as well. The paper contains more detailed information that builds on the advice you'll be hearing today, and I'd encourage you to download the paper from the additional resources box on the left-hand side of your screen. So with these housekeeping items out of the way, I'm excited to introduce our speakers. Jeff Liberty is Senior Vice President for Innovation at Better Lesson. He has more than 20 years of experience as a teacher, principal, and school district administrator. At Better Lesson, he works with education leaders to design transformational professional learning supports, and he also leads the company's partnership with the National Rural Education Association. Also presenting will be Dr. Lori Barron, who has been superintendent of the Evergreen School District in Kalispell, Montana for the last 6 years. Dr. Barron also has more than 20 years of experience as a teacher, a principal, and a district administrator. She's been a Teacher of the Year, a Star Teacher. She was a 2013 National Middle School Principal of the Year, and she was the 2019 Empowered Superintendent of the Year from the Montana Educational Technologists Association. So now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Jeff Liberty.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you very much, all of you out in webinar land, for joining us, and especially in this early summer season. Better Lesson knows a lot because we have worked with a lot of districts and schools across the country about what makes coaching effective, and we're very happy to share what we have learned with you all today. So to start with, we want to make a distinction between instructional coaching as a mode of professional learning and other kinds of professional development that educators experience. There's been a lot of research about this subject, and it turns out that despite our best attempts, workshops and the like that are one-off kinds of experiences very seldom lead to transformational change at the level of classroom practice, and therefore don't have much influence on student growth and achievement. Whereas with instructional coaching that is job embedded, focused on the personalized needs of individual educators, and embedded within the school day for the most part, there is a lot more transfer of the support to the classroom practice and therefore to the students. And this has been supported by a variety of different research organizations and in our own practice. So to understand a little bit about who you all are, we'd love for you to take the following poll. And it's very simple. You can just click right on the screen, but make sure you hit submit about where you are in your journey around instructional coaching. So please just take a moment to do that, and we'll see where we are in terms of the continuum of practice here on this call. Please be sure to hit that submit button. Okay, here's the big reveal. Let's see what we have so far. And you can still submit. So it appears that about a little bit more than half of you are implementing instructional coaching already. And of those of you that are, you're experiencing some challenges. So hopefully what we have to share with you will be useful. And for those of you for whom it's going great, we hope to just build upon what you're doing already and perhaps learn from you. Whereas the 30% or so of you who are just thinking about it, hopefully today's webinar will give you some useful information to help you make that next step. We found instructional coaching to be very impactful for student achievement and for teacher growth. So we want to focus in our entire presentation today on this big key question about providing instructional coaching, but not just for the sake of doing it, but doing it in a way that's sustainable for practice and also leads to student outcome changes. Otherwise, it can be a very expensive distraction, and so we want to make sure that we're framing everything we do in that regard. So for you as leaders, we don't have a sense of your roles right now, but we're going to assume that each of you in some form or fashion is an educational leader. And therefore, we want to talk first about ideas and communication from a leadership standpoint. As Dennis mentioned, I've had a leadership role in many different organizations and many different kinds of roles. And Lori right now is an educational leader. And one of the things that we think is really important to do is to have a vision for teaching and learning in your community, and then to express that very clearly to all members of your community and your stakeholders. And then once you've done that and articulated that, it's important to figure out where are you right now with respect to your journey towards that vision, and what growth do you want to see? So that, roughly speaking, can be described as the delta between where you are and where you want to be. And then finally, make a connection among and between the vision and the desired growth and the purpose of coaching. How will coaching help you achieve your vision? How will it help you grow in the areas that you want to achieve? Because absent that, it can seem like instructional coaching is just one more initiative in a very busy life of schools, and therefore will not be as impactful as it could otherwise be. I want to talk a little bit about how to maximize the impact of coaching. There are certain activities that we highly associate with being impactful as an instructional coach, and there are others in a moment that I'm going to talk about that limit the impact of coaching. For one, it's important for coaches to be speaking with teachers, and for teachers to be speaking with students for that matter, about their goals. What is it that you're trying to achieve in your practice? What do you want to see from your students, and how can we help you get there? And then it's important to connect with teachers on a regular basis and not just see them once in a while, so that they feel like you're really there for them and you're part of the practice that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. One of the ways you can do that is you can observe their classes and provide feedback to them. Another way is that you can work with them to analyze student data and student work together, not just you doing it on your own, and then telling them what the results are. It's very important for them to be involved in that analysis and that reflective work. Another thing that we do quite a lot of and have for the last 10 years is to curate resources for teachers to use. Instructional coaches who are effective, this is a very good use of their time, so that even when you're not actively coaching a teacher in the moment and synchronously, they can gain access to your wisdom and your support asynchronously. So these are some of the activities associated with high impact instructional coaching. And then I want to share with you a shorter list of things that limit instructional coaching. I'm not going to go through these one by one or bullet by bullet, but as you can see, if you can see my slide, I think you can, that most of what limits coach effectiveness and impact has to do with asking coaches to do non-coaching activities. That includes a whole host of administrative duties that take them away potentially from interacting with teachers. And I think it's important to dig in around co-teaching. It may seem that engaging in a co-teaching relationship as a coach with another teacher is an effective use of your time, but in fact, that is a very substantial commitment that will likely take you away from coaching other teachers and therefore building their capacity, but also isn't really you building the capacity of the teacher you're co-teaching with. We do believe that modeling instructional strategies in teachers' classrooms is an enormously helpful and powerful method of support, but co-teaching goes too far. So these are some activities that you should stay away from if you can, if you have any control over coach time or if you are yourself a coach. So I think this slide is out of sequence, actually. So I'm going to skip this second poll. I know you all were very eager to do it. And I'm going to move on to 3 areas of effective implementation of coach time and their talent and training. And these areas really will shape who you pick to be your coaches and will also ultimately impact the effectiveness of your instructional coaching program. So we've learned just over the years that we've been doing instructional coaching that coaching actually consists of a lot of different things. One of the things for sure it can consist of is an in-person conversation that's shoulder to shoulder. That's more typically what we think of when we think of a coach in any domain, whether it be sports or instructional coaching. We also know that coaching can happen in different asynchronous ways and using different technological tools. So for example, over email, quick questions, sharing strategies, et cetera, giving quick encouragement or quick feedback. Certainly on the phone, for those of you who have instructional coaching responsibilities or if it's in your district where you can't be with the teachers all the time, and using video conference, which is our main way at Better Lesson of providing instructional coaching. As I mentioned, obviously being in the classroom is a really powerful way if you can manage it. It's the most time-intensive way, so it's probably one that needs to be deployed judiciously. And then, as I mentioned, creating an online library is another form of coaching that involves time in the sense that you have to put time in on the front end if you are the coach or the coaching team, and also the teachers have to put in some time, but can learn on their own time, and they can drive their own learning by exploring topics that are interesting to them and relevant to their practice. So that's one big thing to think about. One domain of coach practice is time. And within that domain, we think about cadence. How frequently ought a coach to interact with a teacher? And we've learned a lot about this along the way, mostly by making mistakes. So we can share these with you so that you don't make the same mistake. We feel like, for the most part, meeting with a teacher once a week is too frequent, primarily because if you're an instructional coach, you have a lot of teachers that you're supporting. And if you're meeting weekly with one teacher, it's likely that you're not spreading the love to other teachers. But the other part has to do with what the coaching relationship and cycles coaching actually consists of. If you meet weekly, it's likely that the teacher that you're working with may not have had the opportunity to implement a new strategy, and therefore meeting more frequently doesn't actually add value. And by the same token, meeting monthly is too long a time in between visits. A month in the life of a school is an age. A lot can happen and does happen in a month. So I would say a month is too infrequent. We have found that biweekly is the amount of time that best allows for the teaching and learning cycle for coachees to set in and make a difference, where they're trying new strategies, they're measuring the impact, they're gathering artifacts, and they're reflecting on their practice. It is also critical, whether you go with biweekly or some other mode and frequency, that you have some way for teachers to get in touch with coaches in between sessions. That oftentimes is where the most critical coaching happens, and it can be a quick email, it can be a quick text, an instant message, but some kind of lifeline so the teachers don't feel isolated. So then when it comes to talent, we think about this in 3 big buckets, and you can see the slide, so I won't read the bullets, which I also generally don't like presenters to do. But it's important to pick coaches who have credibility. They are skillful, they are well respected by their peers, and they're able to support adults and model coaching strategies. It's also important that they have a set of interpersonal skills that lends itself to building trust primarily, especially in the early going. And those of you who have coaching programs going, you know that this is true. And then in the emotional domain and the intellect domain, it's important from our standpoint that the talent that we hire have emotional intelligence and just generally intellectual horsepower and passion that they can bring to the work of coaching, which can be difficult at times. And so having that right mix of credibility, interpersonal skills, and EI and IQ is really important when thinking about who is a good coach to hire. And then once you've hired your really talented people, it's important to feed them. They are going to be, if things are going well, supporting the capacity of others all day long for however many days your school year lasts. And it's important for you all who are in leadership positions in schools and districts to think about how you're going to feed them, how are you going to support their development. And we've found that having PLCs of coaches, whether they be real and in person or could be virtual across communities, particularly in rural communities where they're networked with other instructional coaches, is a really great way to support the development and to feed the instructional coaches. Also, just providing coaching, as we do in many instances, to the coaches themselves helps them keep their skills sharp and also reinforces the message that instructional coaching is for everyone and continuous improvement is for everybody, not just for teachers who require intervention. And then once you've hired the right people, it's important to think about what's the best match between a particular coach and a particular teacher. We do a lot of thinking about this at Better Lesson. We have an enormous coaching team, and so we have a lot of choices we can make. But even those of you who have one instructional coach, it's important to consider how well will that coach work with the specific teachers you have in mind at a particular grade level or in a specific content area or at a particular stage of their development. And again, I'm not going to read the slide, which you can see yourselves, but it's important to consider what is it that you're trying to accomplish and what's the need for coaching, and then what expertise is beneficial for that particular kind of teacher that you're trying to support. Now it comes to expectations. So you've hired folks, you've set up a platform by which they can be supported themselves. And it's important just as leadership to communicate clearly what your expectations are. And the group that first requires some clarity of expectations are teachers themselves. You're investing in coaching, and what you really want them to understand is that this is not an evaluative process. This is a growth-oriented process. And their role in that process is to try new instructional strategies in particular, to own their own learning and to be honest with their coach about what's working, what isn't working, what's hard for them, what seems easy. And then also just to be regular and consistent. If you have a meeting time that's set with your coach, you don't let other things interfere. You make sure you keep that appointment. And if you can't, you take responsibility for setting up the new time to talk and meet. Then when it comes to the coaches themselves, obviously you want to have expectations that you communicate to them. So the focus there is about what their core work is, and it's just engaging in coaching cycles and not episodic flitting from classroom to classroom without returning back and checking in and seeing how things are going. Your real goal as a coach, it needs to be said, is to build capacity and ownership and not for you to do the work on behalf of teachers, which is really challenging for skillful coaches because they're often very skillful classroom teachers themselves. Trust is incredibly important, as is urgency. So you want to push people as far and as fast as they can go. And in the process, when you're thinking about what risks can I take with this teacher, you have to think about what's right for that individual, which may be very different from the next person you're talking to later in that same day. Staying in good communication is important so that you're not an annoyance, but you're a regular part of a teacher's life. and celebrating successes. We talk about small wins a lot at Better Lesson. It's very hard to change anything about your life, and particularly your classroom practice, especially if you've been at it for a while. So it's important for you to celebrate as a coach when a teacher does take a risk or does have even a small win. And often to do that publicly is very powerful. And then when it comes to leadership, if you are a district level administrator or leader, communicating to your peers and to building level leaders is very important about what instructional coaching is meant to do and what they can do to make it prosper, and also the things to avoid so they don't impede the power of coaching. And the number one thing is about protecting coaching time. If coaches are pulled for administrative duties, or if teachers' coaching time is interrupted for IEP meetings or for meetings with parents or for other kinds of test administration and the like, you're not demonstrating as a leader that coaching is a priority. And so protecting that time and setting it up and making sure that others do as well is really an important leadership activity. Checking in with your coaches, following up when they say they had a difficult conversation with the teacher, or they had a great conversation, or they're in midstream, ask them about how it's going on a regular basis. Don't forget to do that. And maybe you can do that by scheduling time directly with the coaches. Make sure that you as a building level leader in particular are clear about what your priorities are for your school, which may differ some from the district priorities or just in terms of degree. On the positive side, be a learner yourself. Be curious about what's going on between coaches and teachers and ask them to tell you about it. And then help clear the road. If there are challenges, you're the person who's probably best able to make those challenges go away and resolve them, or to say that they can't be resolved, but that you'll get to them shortly. And then importantly, and this is really true for everybody involved, not just for leadership, is all along the way, you're going to learn about what's working well for you and your community when it comes to instructional coaching. So having metrics that you're shooting for and monitoring your progress towards those goals is really important. And always be thinking about what the next step is. We've created this slide with a list of questions for you to consider. I'm sure you have your own questions that you want to ask in your community and your context, but we find that these questions are very helpful in thinking about what the future holds once you've gotten the present moment up and running. So this is really just a summary of what I've shared with you so far, and is gone into much more detail in the white paper that Dennis mentioned that we'll share with you. These are the 8 steps. If you want to think about it as a process, if we could design it differently, it might be more like a spiral. It seems like a linear list, but it's really a process that you return to over and over again. And we hope that articulating it in this way is helpful to you in thinking about what steps you need to take to make instructional coaching impactful in your community. So I'm going to turn the mic over to my friend and partner, Lori, who's going to talk about her school district in Montana. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome to everyone from beautiful Northwest Montana up near Glacier National Park, where we are living the dream every day. I'm excited to have the opportunity to share with some of you who are here today some of our journey. We have just finished what I'll say is our second year of a big risk, and some of that involves failure, and a lot of it involves success, and more of it involves changing as we go and being flexible. And so I'll tell you just a little bit about our district first. I'm thrilled to be the superintendent of the Evergreen School District and finishing my 6th year, about to start year 7. And it is a great district. We are up in the northwest corner of Montana, and we're considered by Montana standards to be not really rural. We are rural by national standards, but by Montana standards, we're probably considered urban. We're one of 7 population centers in the state. And you can see our demographics there on the screen for you for our number of students. We have 757 students in our entire district. And we have 3 buildings and 3 different school sites that comprise those 757 students. And of course, that number goes up and down depending on the day. But the district that I serve in now is smaller than the school where I was a middle school principal for 9 years in Georgia. And so it's interesting when I look at it from scalability. A lot of what I'm going to share with you today works very well for our district and our size. but I think could be scaled down to a building if you have a larger district. Instead of doing a district approach, you could take the approach that we're using and do it at what I believe would be a building level, depending on the number of students and staff that you have. We are the 40th largest district in the state of Montana out of over 400 districts. So that gives you an idea of our size as well. And we're the second largest K-8 district in the state. We're the largest K-8 district in the Flathead Valley, which comprises 19 different school districts. I've put a little bit of our demographics up there because I think it's important. Sometimes people talk about challenges and how to meet those different student challenges that we have. And I know we all have them. I think every school has its challenges, regardless of your demographics. Ours is no different. You can see our racial and ethnic composition there. And you can also see other different services that we provide for students. And we have a lot of students that have additional needs, as I'm sure many of you do. And our teachers have asked for additional support and how to better help students who have those needs. And so in thinking through how to meet those needs, we started talking about how do we help teachers help kids. And we have 22% of our students are students with disabilities. And another almost 10% are under the multi-tiered system of support, or what we used to call response to intervention. And our teachers are struggling. A lot of mental health needs, a lot of difficulties with families and things where kids just have needs that are difficult to meet during the school day. And we needed to do a better job to equip teachers. So when we started looking at our own vision and mission and what we believe in the Evergreen School District, we really want our kids to be resilient. And we want them to be able to thrive and contribute to their community and to give back to and not take away from our society. And we knew that if we could help them become lifelong learners by ensuring quality instruction in a nurturing environment, that would be more likely. And so we started talking about how to help our teachers meet this vision and mission with all students, because we weren't as successful as we wanted to be, and our student achievement wasn't where we wanted it to be. So we said, how are we going to do this? And why would we look at coaching? And we actually stumbled upon coaching. It wasn't something, and I really appreciated that last slide that Jeff put up there of the 8 steps of the progress, and that it is spiral and it's not always linear, because we didn't necessarily go in that order. We started thinking, hey, how can we jump in and help teachers and try a coaching process? And we didn't have a great plan for it to begin with. We wanted to impact teachers so that they could impact students. And we started looking at, do we have teachers who are willing to do this? Do we have teachers who are willing to do more to continue to grow? And we found one of the biggest struggles, and I noticed I was looking at some of the things that you were putting in the group chat, talking about how important it is to build relationships and have that trust. And we had that same concern. How are we going to help teachers understand that having support and having a coach is not a negative thing? And so we had 2 primary goals in mind when we set out to really implement coaching for our teachers. First, we said we want our teachers to see coaching as an opportunity to grow, to be better today than they were yesterday. This is not about remediation. It is not about not being good enough. It is not because I can't do the job. And so when we first started, and I'll say 2 years ago, since our last school year is now over as well, we went to 4 teachers at our junior high school, which is a 5 through 8 campus, and we asked them individually, would they volunteer to participate in outside instructional coaching? Jeff and I had met through a professional association, and I learned of the work that Better Lesson did, and I said, hey, Jeff, will you help us? This is a risk. We don't have a great plan. We're not even sure what the big picture is, but we want to try this and we need help. So we had 4 teachers voluntarily participate in coaching with Better Lesson that year. At the same time, we were hoping we would see, in working on that growth mindset of teachers, we also wanted it to end up increasing student achievement. And so the 2 primary goals we had were to really develop that growth mindset, not look at coaching as remediation, and to improve student achievement. During that year, as we recruited those teachers, we felt like we had to model that as well. If we really believed that coaching was about continuous growth, it wasn't about you're just not good enough, then we needed to model that as administrators as well. We have 6 administrators in our district, and all of us that year started on some path, if we weren't already, in being coached as well. Some of it was through national associations, some of it was through our state associations, and some of it was through Better Lesson. But we said, if we really want to model this coaching mentality, we need coaches as well. And so we had 4 teachers participating with one-on-one coaches through Better Lesson and 6 administrators working through Better, not necessarily just Better Lesson, but working through a coach as well. And during that year, with those 4 teachers and those administrators working with coaching, we started to develop a plan where we could scale our coaching up to be full district, because we didn't want it to be just for teachers who were struggling. And that first year was a pilot. And I appreciated, I saw someone put on the group chat acknowledging that change in implementing coaching does not fix or correct or solve or answer something overnight. It is a process. And when we went to our board and said, we really want to do this and we need the resources to support it, we told them we're looking at a 3 to 5 year return. We don't expect in 1 year that someone having phenomenal coaching with a phenomenal attitude is going to produce phenomenal results. We know it takes time, and it was really important from an administrative point of view that we indicated that to our teachers. This was not some great solving the world's problems answer in 1 year. Quality coaching takes time, and we have to commit to it over time. So we established during that first year, while we had a few teachers and administrators participating, we started looking for a district-wide process. And this past year, we hired a full-time instructional coach to support our teachers. The most critical part of this, and I acknowledge it can be difficult, particularly in smaller districts, we decided for our needs to build that trust, and I noticed that was a theme going in the questions in the group chat, was that trust piece. We opened the position in-house first. We have 3 different buildings, K through 8, and we felt like if we were able to find a quality instructional coach on campus that our teachers could trust and know and believe in, who was not an administrator, who did not evaluate them, that would be the most successful for us. And we were very fortunate to be able to hire someone on staff who was already a member of the teaching staff that our staff trusted. We hired that person. She began this year. And one of the first things we did with her is make sure she had a coach. So our instructional coach has an instructional coach through Better Lesson. And we continue to offer on a voluntary basis Better Lesson coaching to a number of teachers. This past year, we had 10 teachers have individual coaches with Better Lesson, and every teacher had coaching time with our instructional coach. We created the structure, the time, the space. We made sure those meeting times were there. I cannot emphasize enough Jeff's points to what instructional coaches should not be asked to do. We were kind of desperate at the end of the year for one of our awesome big overnight 8th grade field trips, kind of a rite of passage in Montana to do the 8th grade history trip, and we were short on supervisors to go. And someone came and said, hey, can your instructional coach, can she go with us for a couple of days since she's not teaching? And I said, no. I said, she has scheduled coaching during that time. If we had, from the beginning of the year, planned for her to go and scheduled her coaching around that, that would have been different. But we have to protect her time as valuable and important. And if we're going to put those resources in, we have to let her coach. We made it very clear that she was not a co-teacher. That does not mean she can't co-teach and model with a teacher as part of coaching, but she was not going to be a co-teacher in a classroom. We had to make it clear that she wasn't there to pull students out and provide individual instruction for students. We had to work really hard to establish her role, but it was so much easier because our teachers already knew her and trusted her in her space. In those first 2 years, we only have 2 years worth of data, and we don't even have full complete data from this past year yet, but we have seen increased teacher ownership. We've watched them start to reflect on their own. We've watched them tell us, hey, this is what we needed and we need more of it. We've seen different pieces and evidence of coaching working. Sometimes it's just hearing a teacher talk about it in the staff workroom. Sometimes it's actual test score data. One of our teachers who participated in Better Lesson coaching in his first year, that first pilot year when we had 4 teachers, and you can see his picture there with our governor who was visiting our school to see our technology advances. He did coaching for 1 year with Better Lesson. And after many years of stagnant standardized testing scores, his scores came back with a 21% jump in 1 year. And he credits a lot of that to really reflecting as a veteran, quality, top-notch teacher. Reflection. How can I do a better job? And working with his coach and really allowing someone to challenge his practices in a non-critical way and being open to growing and not seeing it as remediation. The exciting thing, he continued with coaching with our instructional coach in district this year and maintained that same level of student achievement. It wasn't a one-year fluke. And our board actually kind of was chuckling with me and said, Lori, I thought you said it took 3 to 5 years. And they're excited that we're seeing returns in some areas much faster than we ever anticipated. And it's happening because teachers are owning it and teachers are reflecting and growing. And we're really excited about that. We also put a lot of weight on teacher perceptions. It matters to us what people think. And many times perceptions are reality. A common question we ask every year of our staff is what they think about a formal process being in place to support new staff members in their professional practice. And 3 years in a row, it was our lowest area on our full staff survey. And we couldn't help but notice and say, how can we ignore this? We have to address this. After putting in place one-on-one coaching with Better Lesson and district-wide coaching internally with our own staff, we had the highest growth on that statement than any other statement on our staff perception survey. It grew from 2.88 to 3.62. And that was phenomenal. And teachers' comments, a lot of the comments were, please don't take our instructional coach. Please give her more time. And a lot of the other feedback of the people participating, particularly in the one-on-one coaching, you can see there, it showed across all areas that teachers felt like it was worth it. And one thing to note, when you look at these numbers, in order for something to count in here, to be one of those 7 out of 9 that you see listed there for teachers being more likely to take risk, the teacher had to score it an 8, 9, or 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. So if the teacher scored it a 7, it counts as a no here. So keeping that in mind, these numbers are pretty phenomenal, we thought. More of our teachers participating and coaches want to take risk now because we're supporting risk are okay. And not getting it right the first time is okay. As long as what they're doing is not illegal, immoral, unethical, or unsafe, we're going to support that risk. Educator morale is up. Teachers are reporting more student-centered classrooms, and teachers feel like they are growing as educators as part of instructional coaching. We also have teachers who are telling other teachers, you should participate in the one-on-one coaching. We're going into year 3 next year, and we have 6 more staff who will be working with Better Lesson next year. And we're still keeping our instructional coach with her own coach from Better Lesson because it's important to support her while she tries to support 55 other teachers. The teachers feel like it's a really personalized experience. They're very satisfied with it. And the one that was most gratifying to us as a district, looking at it particularly from an administrative perspective, is that every single teacher who participated in outside coaching said that what they were working on with their coach was aligned to what we as administrators were already asking them to do. It is critical that we're not asking them to work on one thing with one group and another thing with another group and another thing with a different project, that we're very aligned. And that alignment was very important to us. And so something that I really encourage those of you considering a coaching program or that are already in, and when we look at that poll you took at the beginning of our session, it looked like a lot of you are already doing coaching but having some challenges. It's really, really important that you have a plan going in. What is it that you're working on? As I said, we really wanted to improve teacher mindset about growth and then therefore see increases in student achievement. But inside of that, how were we doing that? That was very important to us. And so I want to share some of that with you of what our approach was about really making a plan from a district perspective so that there was alignment and teachers didn't feel like in one space they were working on differentiation. In another space, they were working on improving how they write IEPs. In another space, they were expected to do a better job with, classroom management. Obviously, all of those things are very important to a successful operation of a school and a district. But we felt like it was important to really hone in on how they were feeling and what we could do to help with instructional strategies. And so we made a 5-year plan, and we have our instructional coach who's inside with us, our internal instructional coach, working on that professional learning plan with us. And as you can see, this past year was the first year of that 5-year plan. It was the second year of our pilot kind of with coaching, and we felt like we were ready to really delve into deep, meaningful discussions about instructional strategies. And so this past year, our focus every day, every month with every teacher was on differentiation and using formative assessment to adjust instruction. Next year, you'll see we'll be working on effective lesson planning and diagnostic assessments. And then you can see we have plans for the next 3 years as well. And what we found is really honing in on those two strategies, one for instruction and one for assessment, gave teachers an area to focus, and they chose what they wanted to work on within those areas. And then they could work on that with their better lesson coach and with their district instructional coach. Here's an example of the monthly focus we used for this past year. As I mentioned, our instructional focus was differentiation, and our assessment focus was formative assessment. And we were able to work really closely with teachers on 8 topics, 8 strategies within each of those areas. Instead of just a shot across the bow and not having depth and meaning, we were able to work really in depth with each of these strategies throughout the year. And the data we have from classroom observations, from walkthroughs, from informal discussions, from qualitative statements written by teachers is that this is working for us, and we're having a common language, and teachers are now including even their paraprofessionals come to our training, and our paraprofessionals are able to use the same common language. And then they're able to take that back to the instructional coach in our district or the instructional coach with better lesson and talk about what can I do differently with scaffolding? How can I use graphic organizers to improve that? And it's making a difference, not just in hopefully improving our practice of instruction and therefore student achievement, but it's also improving collegiality. It's improving culture. Our paraprofessionals report feeling more included, more valued. They understand the common language that we're working on. So this is far beyond just improving what students are doing in the classroom. We have shared so many different things about what's going on with our coaching and how things are working. But I want to share with you one thing that we're looking at for next year. As we go into next year, you take risk and sometimes you fail, sometimes it doesn't work. But I really appreciated one of Jeff's comments earlier about the 8 steps, one of his last slides he shared. We found that we were doing a little bit of what Jeff said, don't do. We were kind of hitting everybody equally and trying to get to everybody once a week. And you're right, Jeff, it wasn't successful that way. We found it was kind of grab it, work on something. There wasn't time to implement it. There was too much time here, not enough time with this staff member. And we're doing exactly what you said. And next year, we're going to group our staff into tiers. And those who have an instructional coach with better lesson, we're going to back off a little bit. And those who are brand new, I noticed some of the comments in our group chat about brand new teachers, we're going to push in a little more. And we've got what we're calling 4 tiers now. And so we're going to work with teachers based on where they are. We're going to take our own advice after a year of teaching about differentiation. We're going to differentiate as well. And while that sounds brilliant and we should have thought of that to begin with, sometimes you have to get in and try and pilot and take risk and make changes. And we're learning from our own advice that we need to differentiate our coaching just like we want teachers to differentiate their instruction. And that's not something we did in our first year. So a lot of lessons have been learned. We are starting year 3 next year. We're going to keep our better lesson outside coaching. All of that's on a voluntary basis, and different districts do it different ways, but we want that to be voluntary. We are going to keep our internal district instructional coach working with all certified teachers in the district, and we're going to tier those based on the need of the teacher. And for resources, just kind of, I know some of you are probably saying, what do you do to finance this? We are using Title I funding. We're a district where every student's able to eat free lunch and free breakfast every day based on eligibility through a federal grant. And we are using Title I money to fund our instructional coaching, which we think is a great way to supplement what we're already doing for our staff and students. We did have to budget creatively, and we were careful, and we've done it in stages, and we feel really good about where we are, and we're looking forward to next steps. Our instructional coach will start year 2 next year. She's excited. The staff's excited. We have rave reviews about teachers loving that it's a teacher, someone they can trust, that teacher. We also have set up some really strong boundaries with the instructional coach and administration. Questions we don't ask. We do not want to breach that confidentiality between the coach and the teacher, and we do not want that coach to be feeling like she's out there to evaluate teachers, because that's not her role. We feel very excited. We think we're already seeing market success much faster than we thought we would, although we still realize that it will take a full 3 to 5 years probably to see the full impact of what we're doing. Our board is supportive, our community is supportive, and we're really looking forward to continuing. So we've gone over a lot, and that was very, very brief information about what we're doing. Of course, I'll be happy to share more, but I know we have some questions out there that we want to take time for Jeff and I to try to address those. So I will turn it back over to Dennis for leading that Q&A for us.
Thank you, Lori. And thanks to Jeff as well for a very insightful presentation. You've given listeners a lot to think about. So we have about maybe 13 minutes or so left for questions from the audience. I'd like to remind everybody that it's not too late to submit a question for either Jeff or Lori. If you have something that you'd like to ask, please do so using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So we have a few questions about buy-in and how you get the buy-in of teachers to instructional coaching. So I would like to ask both of you, but Lori, maybe you can start by talking about how you address buy-in in your district in particular.
Yeah, big for us was hiring someone internally and someone the teachers already knew. And coincidentally, fortunately, karma, whatever you want to call it, this teacher had taught in 2 of our 3 buildings and had already developed a strong rapport. And I realize that's not always possible. I understand that we really fell into a gold mine there. But for us, it was someone teachers wanted. It was not an unknown. It was not someone that they didn't trust. And then we made sure all of the communication about the coaching came from her. None of the coaching information, the schedule, the requirements, the to-do, any of that came from administration. Administration backed off on all of the logistics. Everything came from the instructional coach. And it made a huge difference because teachers saw it as a welcome help instead of a forced directive. And while we do, I do want to mention this, I failed to share this, the administrative team meets with our instructional coach once a week, every single week, the whole year, every Monday at 1 o'clock. And we meet for about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the needs, so that administration can feel still a part of what's going on and not isolated and separated from it. But all of the work with instructional coaching comes through the instructional coach and not as a directive from administration.
Yeah, that's good. Jeff, do you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I think that Lori may be too humbled by half. The other thing that I know does and is important to say about buy-in is to have a coach herself and to make sure that the coaching culture is established and that's an idea that is communicated across the community. I have a conversation a day with a superintendent or a principal about where to start with instructional coaching. And a lot of times the place you start is with yourself. And so if you yourself are willing to accept the idea that you're getting coaching, you're in a much more powerful position to say that coaching is for everyone and not an intervention. And then the other part, I think, is about teacher selection and the growth of your program at a sustainable rate. So starting with teachers that you know are open to coaching, who also happen to have the buy-in of their peers, is a powerful way to get started so that they can communicate in that way that teachers do one to another, that this is not a terrible thing. I actually learned a lot from my coach. And if that teacher has the regard and respect of his or her colleagues, then the next phase of coaching will go all that much better, and there will be buy-in built in that way. So there's some strategy involved and some kind of game theory and strategy around your theory of action that is important to take into consideration.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody asked, how do you know if the coaching is being done properly? I guess, in other words, how do you evaluate the coaching that's being done? Jeff, maybe you could start with this one, and then we can turn that over to Lori as well.
Well, Lori gave a really good answer about the monitoring of the process. I think the main way is that you will hear teachers saying that the coach is helpful. So there's some evidence we can gather by just hearing the coachees speak about their experience. The other way that you can know if you're a leader of a system or a building, or even if you're a coach yourself, is to see the impact in classroom. You should be seeing small and big changes in terms of teacher practice. You should be seeing small and big changes in terms of student growth and achievement, things that weren't happening and probably weren't going to happen absent that coaching. And then there's the lagging data, of course, that has to do with student achievement data that we all really care about, and that's important. That takes a little bit longer to show results, but and in some instances, and we have some evidence of this in our own coaching, happen relatively quickly, as long as everybody's really bought into the process.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I gave you such a brief skeletal view of what we're doing. There's a lot of depth, but there is a fine line between accountability and micromanagement, and we try to balance that well. I really believe in you inspect what you expect. And a big piece of evaluating for that, for me, is that our instructional coach, like I said, meets with our administrative team every single week. It also gives our administrative team some type of empowerment of feeling like they're included while they're not managing it. And we don't want administration to not be a part of instructional growth. They're instructional leaders in their building, but at the same time, we don't want micromanagement. And so I personally, and remember, we're in a smaller district, different than I came from a district with almost 23,000 kids, and I realized this would not be feasible to do this same thing, but you could scale it down to a school level. I am the direct supervisor of our instructional coach in our district, and she and I meet once a week for an hour. So I meet with the team of administrators and the instructional coach once a week, and then I meet with each administrator one-on-one once a week, and I meet with our instructional coach once a week. And that helps keep the alignment and the accountability there, while also keeping the opportunity for freedom and flexibility, and hopefully decreasing that feeling of micromanagement at the teacher level, because the instructional coach is still the one delivering everything. But we have lots of conversations, lots of discussions about what's going well and what's not. I think the biggest thing is you can't have an instructional coach and check it off and check out. For us, you have to stay involved. You can't just say, oh, we have somebody, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. She does the lion's share of the work, and she's incredible at what she does, but there's still accountability at the administrative level for the work that she does.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. What suggestions do you have for hiring coaches in a district that might be lacking a talent pool?
I will say that had we not had the internal candidates that we had with such talent and skill, and again, we were just in a great situation, I would not have taken the risk of going inside without the talent. Going inside was critical for us, and it was super important for establishing credibility and trust and relationships. But I also know those things are establishable over time. And I would have not sacrificed talent for immediate trust when that trust would have been broken immediately had the teachers realized that person didn't have the talent or skill to do the coaching. So if I'd had to choose and we didn't have the talent inside, I would have gone outside and then worked really hard to help that person build credibility and trust and relationships as soon as possible. It may have taken longer to get to the meaningful, gritty coaching piece, but that would have been worth it. I would not have sacrificed talent just for quick trust that would have been broken anyway when the talent wasn't there.
Okay. Jeff, anything to add
that a little bit and say that every school or district has talented teachers, and a subset of those talented teachers also have the skills and dispositions I was talking about earlier in the presentation. So there's a strategic question that has to get asked about whether that person or persons can be developed into being a coach for adult learning, and at what cost. But I don't think I'm not aware of any districts or schools that have no talent that can be cultivated. It's just a question of timing and a question of strategy.
Yeah, fair point, Jeff. I should definitely clarify. We have plenty of talent on our staff that we could have cultivated, but I was going in a worst case scenario if you were a very small district and felt like you couldn't. But agreed, Jeff. Certainly there's talent that can be cultivated through coaching as well.
Yeah, and if you don't have anybody that you can count on to do that right now, or it's not a good time, we exist for this reason at Better Lesson.
And our instructional coach we have now, as talented and skilled as she is, she did not have a background in coaching. She had to be cultivated and trained as well. She was a very talented teacher and very credible, but she has a coach for that reason as well, and continues to grow herself.
Lori, I know you touched on this in your presentation, but could you just elaborate a little bit on how you ensured alignment between the instructional coaching and your district's priorities, and how you sort of facilitated that among multiple coaches?
Yes. So we have a plan where we have job-embedded professional learning throughout the year based on those areas of focus that I mentioned earlier. For example, last year was differentiation and formative assessment. And our teachers we have a school improvement plan, which is aligned to those 2 district goals. The school then has their plan. Each teacher then has a SMART goal that matches with one of those, either differentiation and or formative assessment. Then every teacher has an internal instructional coach, and some teachers by choice have an external instructional coach with Better Lesson, focusing on that SMART goal that came from the school improvement plan, that came from the district plan. And then we meet one Wednesday a month. We have an early release. Students get out at 2:00 the second Wednesday of every month, and the instructional coach and I lead district-wide professional learning over those 2 topics, differentiation and formative assessment, for example, last year. And then teachers have job-embedded time to create lesson plans at the conclusion of that mini lesson that we do together, and we bring the whole district together for that. And then they can create lesson plans off of those to share with their colleagues over the next month and implement in their class. And then every teacher has 2 job-embedded professional learning days each year where they get a full day of release time, one day in the fall, one day in the spring, to work in their grade level or subject on those same 2 topics, differentiation and or formative assessment. And the instructional coach is also visiting classes to work on those 2 focuses as well. And we also use teacher video, where teachers reflect and video themselves and then do reflection over, again, looking for those same instructional practices. That's a very quick overview. There's a lot more depth to it, but everything is aligned from bottom up, top down, across to those topics that we're working on for that year.
Great. We have a lot of good questions that we won't be able to get to, unfortunately, but I think we have time for one more. This might be a good one to end on. I know this has been the theme of the whole conversation today, but to sort of sum up, can you just talk about why coaching is so powerful, especially for rural districts?
Yeah, I think sometimes we allow ourselves to use location as an excuse to not be connected, and there is so much knowledge out there that it's important to see beyond ourselves. And some of the best professional learning available is next door to you and the teacher down the hall. But it's also important to make sure you do not use location as an excuse. We're a smaller district, obviously, but we connected the teachers who have experience across the whole country by reaching out to Better Lesson. And the neat thing for us about Better Lesson is we could do one teacher having a coach, or we could do the whole staff if we like, based on our resources or needs. And each of those coaches have different coaches. And so you're bringing that experience from people across the country into our district and exponentially growing our background and our knowledge through other people's experience. And so I think it's really important to be able to use a tool like Better Lesson to help you stay connected, understanding you can grow inside as well, but it's important to connect outside.
Great. Jeff, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's an important question you're asking. I'll end with 2 thoughts about rural schools and districts. One is that oftentimes rural schools and districts are in the position of hiring teachers for specific positions that are hard to staff, that are less than ideal. And so in that way, but they're ideal in other ways. They might be members of the community. They might have connections there. And so investing in them through coaching is really important, because you may not have another calculus teacher lined up right behind them to take their place. And the other thing I'd say is that it's easier, and this was a surprise to us at Better Lesson, for rural teachers and rural educators to get connected via technology than we expected. Through agriculture, through interacting with their family, through professional learning. They're used to using platforms like the one we're using today, or video conferencing, which is what we typically use. And so that prepares them to be open to receiving expertise from anywhere and to anywhere, more than some other communities. So rural communities are already ahead in that respect because they're using technology to communicate as it is.
Yeah, thank you. So we're out of time. I'm going to wrap things up now. If anybody submitted a question that we weren't able to get to in the Q&A portion, someone from Better Lesson will follow up with you directly. And if you have any other thoughts or questions about anything that you heard today, I'd encourage you to reach out to Better Lesson by using the contact information in this final slide. I'd like to thank our presenters today, Jeff Liberty and Lori Barron, for a very informative presentation. I'd like to thank all of the audience members for joining us as well. Hopefully you gained some useful insight that can help you develop more effective instructional coaching programs for your own schools. As a reminder, you'll receive an email message within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. And if you haven't already done so, please also take a minute to download the white paper that Better Lesson has provided in the left-hand side of your screen. So thanks again to everybody for participating, and have a great day.